The same family that threw me out on the street for my 21st birthday came crawling back the second they smelled money. For years, I was basically a ghost to them, a forgotten mistake. But the moment they heard I'd inherited a fortune, their memories suddenly got crystal clear. They showed up with their hands out and sickly sweet smiles, demanding what they called their rightful share. They really thought I was the same broken kid they'd thrown away. They thought I'd crumble, that I'd just be grateful they were paying attention to me again. But they had no idea who I'd become in the years they were gone. They had no idea I'd been preparing for a moment just like this. And the surprise I had waiting for them wasn't a check. It was a reckoning. The backstory, a life erased my 21st birthday, wasn't a party. It was the end of the life I knew. There was no cake, no balloons, no one singing happy birthday off-key. There was just a stack of my stuff in cardboard boxes by the front door and the cold, hard looks on my parents' faces. My dad stood there with his arms crossed, his face like stone. My mom was just wringing her hands, refusing to look at me. Her silence cut way deeper than any angry word ever could have. "You're an adult now," my father said, his voice totally flat. "It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. We've done our part." Their part. Their part had always felt like a checklist of obligations, and the check mark next to my name was always fainter than the one for my older brother. Alex. Alex was the son our family orbited around. He was the golden child, the one who got all their hopes, their pride, and their money. He got the new car for his 16th birthday, a fully funded ride through a private university, and even the down payment for his first apartment. His successes were framed on the walls. His failures were just learning experiences. I was the shadow he cast. I was just a constant reminder of their tight budget, another mouth to feed, another tuition they had to worry about. My clothes were Alex's hand-me-downs. When I did something well, I'd get a polite, distracted nod. When I struggled, it was a flaw in my character. I remember winning a regional science fair in high school. I was so proud. My heart was pounding because I just desperately wanted them to be proud too. I came home with that blue ribbon, and my dad just glanced at it and said, "That's nice. Did you take out the trash?" That same night, they spent 2 hours on the phone with Alex, helping him plan his campaign for student body president at college. I just sat at the kitchen table holding that ribbon, feeling completely invisible. So when they told me I was out on my 21st birthday, it wasn't a total shock. It was just how final it was that knocked the wind out of me. "We need you to be out by the end of the week," my mother mumbled, finally looking at me. Her eyes were basically begging me not to make a scene. Alex wasn't even there. He was on a ski trip with his frat brosa trip they'd paid for. He sent me a text that just said, "HBD, bro. Party hard." He had no idea he was texting his now homeless brother. The first few months were a total blur of poverty and desperation. I had a part-time job at a bookstore that barely covered food, let alone rent. My first home was a lumpy, stained couch, belonging to a friend from work, and it was another friend's floor. I learned to live on instant noodles and the kindness of people who barely knew me. I learned how to make myself small, to be a quiet guest, to never wear out my welcome, even. When I had nowhere else to go, the emotional damage was so much worse than the physical stuff. When your own family deliberately abandons you, it leaves this wound that feels like it's in your DNA. It's a rejection, so deep it can just shatter your sense of self-worth. For a long time, I felt like human garbage, like something that was just that easy to throw away. I was convinced I must have done something to deserve it, that I was just unworthy of love. That feeling of worthlessness followed me everywhere, a ghost whispering in my ear whenever anything started to go right. I enrolled in community college, taking night classes after my shifts at the bookstore and a second job I got washing dishes. I was exhausted all the time, running on caffeine and pure stubbornness. I'd see other kids my age complaining about 8 a.m. classes or their parents' curfews. And I'd feel this bitter envy that tasted like acid. They had a safety net. I was walking a tightrope over a canyon, and there was no net below me slowly. And I mean painfully slowly. I started building a life from the wreckage. Took 2 years of working nonstop just to save enough for a security deposit on a tiny, rundown studio apartment over a laundromat. The day I got those keys was the proudest day of my life. The place was small, the heat was sketchy, and the noise from the dryers was constant. But it was mine. It was my sanctuary. I finished my associate's degree and landed a better job in the billing department of a logistics company. I started making real friends. Friends who knew my story and saw me for me, not for what my family thought of me. They became my real family. We celebrated birthdays, helped each other move, and showed up for each other when we were sick or heartbroken. I was learning that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up for you. Years went by, got promoted. I moved into a nicer apartment. I even started saving a little money. The sharp pain of being abandoned had faded into a dull ache, a scar I just learned to live with. I never heard a word from my parents or Alex. Not one call, not a Christmas card, not a text. It was like I'd been totally erased from their lives. And honestly, I was grateful for the silence. It let me heal. It let me build my own world on my own terms, free from their judgment. I was finally stable. For the first time in my adult life, I was actually content. The inciting incident, a twist of fate, the letter that blew up my quiet, peaceful life, arrived on a Tuesday. It looked boring, just a cream-colored envelope tucked between a credit card offer and my gas bill. It had the embossed return address of some law firm I'd never heard of. My first thought was, oh God, I'm being sued. My heart started hammering as I slid it open with a kitchen knife. It was from an estate lawyer. It said, in a lot of dense formal words, that my great-aunt Eleanor had passed away and that I was the sole beneficiary of her estate. Great-aunt Eleanor. I had to dig deep in my memory to even place her. I'd only met her a few times when I was a little kid. She was my grandmother's sister, and my parents always talked about her in these hushed, disapproving tones. They just called her eccentric. She never married or had kids and had a sharp wit that my parents couldn't stand. I just remembered her as this woman with kind eyes who slipped me a $20 bill once at a family thing and told me to buy a book and get smart. My parents made me give it back. She was an outcast, just like me. I guess in her quiet way. She saw what was going on in our family and recognized a kindred spirit. I scanned down to the bottom of the letter. It's the part about the estate's value. I had to read the number 3 times before my brain could even process it. It was a ridiculous amount of money, life-changing money, generational wealth. Eleanor, the quiet, eccentric outcast, had apparently been an incredibly smart investor, building a secret fortune her whole life. My first feeling wasn't joy. It was this wave of cold, stomach-lurching dread. I just knew. The quiet life I had fought so hard for, it was over. I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that this money was a lighthouse. And it was going to draw them right back. To me, it didn't even take a month. I don't know how they found out. Maybe the will was public record, or maybe some distant relative they actually talked to was gossiping. The first contact was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, it's your mother. I hope you are well. We should talk. Just reading the words your mother sent a jolt of anxiety through me. My hands started shaking. I hadn't heard from her in almost a decade. For a second, I thought about just deleting it, blocking the number, and pretending it never happened. But I knew it wouldn't be that easy. This was just the first shot. I didn't reply. 2 days later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a master class in manipulation. Her voice was syrupy sweet, just dripping with fake concern that made my skin crawl. Honey, it's me. Was just thinking about you. I heard about Eleanor. God rest her soul. Such a wonderful woman. We were all so sad to hear she passed. Anyway, I'd love to catch up. It's been too long. It was all an act, a performance designed to get back into my life. Mentioning Eleanor was the key. She was letting me know that she knew. Hearing her talk about being sad just felt like she was spitting on my gray tant's memory. Reducing her whole life to a dollar sign, I knew this wasn't a real chance to reconcile. It felt like they were just ripping open old wounds to pour salt in them. Against my better judgment, I called her back. I figured ignoring them would only end with them showing up at my apartment. The conversation was surreal. She went on and on about their lives, their minor health problems, how high property taxes were. Then, of course, how proud they were of Alex, who was married with 2 kids and apparently struggling in his middle management. Job. It was all a story designed to make me feel sorry for them. To lay the groundwork for the ask, she finally got to the point. Her voice dropping to a whisper, like she was letting me in on a secret. So, about Eleanor's gift. It's just such a blessing, isn't it? For the family, for the family. That word just hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The family that decided I wasn't a part of it the second I became a financial burden. The family that let me struggle and almost go under without so much as a phone call. Now all of a sudden I was family again because I wasn't a liability. Anymore, I was an asset. I felt this surge of cold, clear anger. I told her, politely but firmly, that the inheritance was a private matter and I wasn't ready to talk about it. The sweetness in her voice vanished. Well, she snapped back, "There's no need to be like that. We're your parents. We just want what's best for everyone." The call ended soon after that, the nice act totally gone. The battle lines had been drawn. The escalation, the demands begin the subtle approach didn't last long. Those delicate questions about the family blessing quickly turned into shameless, entitled demands. It started with my mother calling to suggest things. She'd say Alex and his wife had been trying to save for a down payment on a house for the kids. A little gift from the inheritance would be such a wonderful thing for your nephews. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order wrapped in a bow. When I gave a vague answer saying I needed time, my father got on the phone. He was way less subtle. Look, he started dropping the act entirely. That's family money. Eleanor was my aunt. It's only right that it's shared. Alex has children to think about. If you're single, you don't have the same needs. It's about doing the right thing. The nerve was just breathtaking. They had decided we weren't a family a decade ago. And now they were trying to force us back into being one just to get their hands on my money. Their arguments were this toxic mix of guilt trips and gaslighting. They talked about fairness while totally ignoring the 10 years of profound unfairness I'd lived through. They talked about my needs as if they had a clue what I needed. When I was sleeping on floors and living on RAMEN, I told them no. I said that I was grateful for Eleanor's gift. I was going to honor her by managing it responsibly, which meant I'd be making the decisions. That's when the harassment really started. The calls became relentless, at all hours. They left these long, rambling voicemails that swung between tearful begging and angry accusations. My brother Alex, who'd been silent until now, started blowing up my phone with texts. They went from fake friendly, "Hey man, long time, we should grab a beer and talk about this," to just insulting, "Don't be selfish. Mom and dad aren't getting any younger. This money could set them up for retirement. You owe them." They started showing up at my apartment building, buzzing my intercom over and over until I finally had to disconnect it. One evening, my mother cornered me in the parking lot at my office, her face all tear-streaked, accusing me of tearing the family apart. The family she had torn apart. It was like living in an alternate reality. This pushed me to get a lawyer. I found an excellent estate lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davis. I sat in her office and just laid out the whole ugly story. From my 21st birthday to the non-stop harassment. She listened patiently, not giving anything away. When I finished. She gave me this grim but reassuring smile. Legally, she said, they don't have a leg to stand on. Your great-tant's will is ironclad. She named you and only you. They have no legal claim to a single penny. She explained that what my family felt they were entitled to and what was legally real were two completely different things. The law doesn't care about feelings, it cares about documented wishes, she told me. Your great-aunt made her intentions perfectly clear by creating such a specific will. But then she warned me. That doesn't mean they can't make your life a living. Hell, she said, leaning forward. They can contest the will. They could try to argue that your great-aunt wasn't mentally sound, or that you somehow manipulated her. It would be baseless, but it would also be a long, expensive, and emotionally draining legal battle. They would probably lose, but they could. Tie up the inheritance for years and drag your name through the mud. Hearing this just solidified my anger into something colder, more strategic. They wanted to play a game of intimidation and entitlement. Fine, but we weren't going to be playing by their rules. I was done being the victim in my own life story. Ms. Davis and I started putting a plan together. A way to end this whole thing. For good on my terms. The kid they threw out was gone. In his place was a man who had learned how to fight for himself. And this was a fight I was going to win. The climax, the final confrontation after weeks of their nonstop harassment. I decided it was time to end the madness. I sent a single short email to my parents and brother. I have made my final decision about the inheritance. I'm willing to meet one last time to tell you what it is. My lawyer's office next Thursday at 2 p.m. This will be the last time we ever discuss this. They accepted immediately. I could almost feel their smugness through the screen. They saw this as their victory. They thought calling them to a lawyer's office meant I was ready to surrender and negotiate the terms. They had no idea they were walking into my ambush. I chose the conference room at Ms. Davis's firm on purpose. It was neutral ground, a place of power where their drama wouldn't work. It was one of those sleek rooms with a long mahogany table and a huge window overlooking the city. The kind of room that screams that serious business is about to go down. I got there early with Ms. Davis. We laid out our documents, and I just tried to breathe. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't the same kind of fear as before. This was like the nervous energy an actor feels right before stepping on stage for a part they know by heart. My family, my father, mother, and Alex walked in right at 2 p.m. They were dressed up like they were heading to a celebration dinner. My dad had this self-satisfied smirk on his face. Alex looked cocky, like he was already spending the money in his head. My mother tried to give me a soft, placating smile. I didn't return it. They sat across from me and Ms. Davis, looking at me expectantly. "Thank you for coming," I started, my voice clear and steady. "I've called this meeting to tell you my final and non-negotiable decision about the inheritance, my great-aunt Eleanor. Left to me?" My father leaned forward. "Good, about time you came to your senses. We've already drawn up a list of how the money can best support the whole family." He actually tried to slide a piece of paper across the table. I just held up my hand. "No. Before I tell you my decision, you need to understand why we're here." I let that sink in. I looked each of them right in the eye. "For 10 years, you erased me. On my 21st birthday, you didn't just ask me to leave. You threw me away like I was trash. Do you have any idea what that was like? Do you know what it feels like to wonder where you're going to sleep? To count change just to see if you can afford to eat? To feel so completely alone and worthless that you start to believe you deserved it?" My mother started to protest. "Now, that's not fair." Ms. Davis cut her off with a sharp, "Please let him finish." I kept going, my voice getting stronger. I built a life from nothing. Absolutely nothing. Without a penny of your help or a single word of encouragement, and I was finally okay. Then this money shows up, and suddenly you remember I exist. You don't want to reconnect with me. You want to connect with my bank account. You talk about moral obligation, but where was your moral obligation to me when I was a desperate kid with nowhere to go? What you feel isn't obligation. It's just pure, shameless entitlement. The emotional damage from abandonment is a deep trauma, leaving feelings of rejection that can last a lifetime. You didn't just cause me financial problems. You caused deep, psychological wounds that I have spent years trying to heal. Alex actually scoffed. Oh, here we go. Get out the world's smallest violin. It's just money. Don't be so dramatic. You're right, Alex. It is just money, I said, turning to him. And that's why my decision is so simple. You came here today, expecting to negotiate. You came expecting a handout. You are going to be very disappointed. I slid a leather portfolio to the center of the table. You wanted to know what I'm doing with the inheritance? Here it is. See, Ms. Davis told me that while you have no legal claim, you could try to drag this out in court. I have zero interest in that. So I've taken a step to make sure Eleanor's legacy is protected and that it is placed forever beyond your reach. Let them stare at the portfolio for a second before I dropped the bomb. I have placed the entire inheritance into a series of irrevocable trusts. I saw the confusion on their faces. They didn't get it. I enjoyed explaining it. An irrevocable trust means the assets inside it are no longer legally mine. They're owned and controlled by the trust itself, managed by a professional. This means the money can't be touched in lawsuits, and it can't be claimed by manipulative family members. My father's face started turning a dark shade of red. What are you talking about? What beneficiaries? I'm so glad you asked, I said, a real smile finally hitting my face. The main beneficiary is a charitable foundation I've set up in Gritton and Eleanor's name. It will give grants and scholarships to two specific groups, homeless youth who have aged out of the foster system, to give them the support I never had. And it will fund STEM education programs for kids from low-income communities. The rest is in a secure trust for my own future, managed by a third party to make sure that I, and only I, can benefit from it. I leaned back in my chair. Your names aren't in the documents. There is no family fund. There's nothing for you. You get nothing, not a single dollar. You can't fight it, you can't claim it, and you can't touch it. It's gone. By trying to take it all, you made sure you will get none of it. This meeting is over. The resolution and karmic justice, the explosion, was immediate and loud. My father slammed his fist on the table, his face turning purple with rage. Alex jumped up and started shouting, calling me a traitor. My mother burst into these dramatic sobs, wailing about how I could be so cruel. It was a spectacular meltdown of pure greed. But for the first time in my life, their anger and their tears did nothing to me. It was just noise. Their power over me was gone. Ms. Davis stood up calmly. I think we're done here. Security can escort you out if you need help leaving. The threat of being thrown out was enough to shut them up. They grabbed their stuff, shot me looks of pure hatred, and stormed out of the room, leaving behind this beautiful, profound silence. When that door clicked shut, I felt this massive weight lift off my shoulders. It was the weight of their judgment, their disappointment, their expectations, and it was finally gone. I was free. The aftermath was exactly what I wanted. Total silence. They never contacted me again. I blocked their numbers, and they never tried to see me again. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine. Alex's money problems continued, made worse by his own bitterness. My parents had to sell their house and downsize because their retirement plan, which apparently was my inheritance, had vanished. I didn't take any pleasure in it, but it was the direct result of their own actions. It was karma, I guess. A perfect reflection of the future they had tried to force on me. My new life, on the other hand, really began to blossom. I got involved with the foundation. I went to the opening of a new wing at a youth shelter that our first grant had funded. I sat on the scholarship committee reading essays from brilliant young students who just needed a chance. I got letters from kids who were the first in their families to go to college, all thanks to a gift from a woman they never met. Managed by a guy who understood their struggle completely. The inheritance didn't just buy me security, it bought me a purpose. It let me turn the worst pain of my life into something good. I had taken the poison of my past and created an antidote, not just for me, but for other people. My story had a tough ending, but it was an empowering one. It really forces you to think about what family really means and how messy things can get when money and relationships collide. I know so many people have faced situations like this. What are your thoughts on family, money, and obligation? Do you ever had to choose between your own well-being and a family tie? Let me know in the comments below. I read all of them. And if this story resonated with you, please think about liking and subscribing for more stories about navigating life's biggest challenges. In the end, my family didn't just want my inheritance. They wanted control. They wanted to pull me back into that old dynamic where I was powerless, and they held all the cards. By giving the money a purpose that had nothing to do with them, I finally took control of my own story. They might have written me out of their lives, but I got to write the final chapter. Thanks for watching.